everybody. This is Justin Case from American Newscape, rejoining our friend, and we call brother occasionally, Scott Dudley for American Consciousness. Hello, Scott. Welcome back to American Newscape.
Brother Justin, it is a pleasure to be here.
What is Scott? And I assume you're ready for this, so why don't you just take it away?
All right. So we're going to talk today about nature, but I kind of want to swing it back because we talked last week about music. And one of the things that music does is it's got some really good nature songs. So, right off the top of your head, Justin, when you think about nature and music, what was that one song that just kind of touched you and said, "Whoa, this has got nature in the bag"?
Well, it's classic, and I picked it up as a little kid, spinning platters. It was Nature Boy by Nat King Cole.
Nice. Now, I had time to kind of brew the question, so I was thinking about it, and you know, Nature's Way was like popped into my head automatically because of the song, and I thought, well, that's kind of good, but then I thought, well, how about Grazing in the Grass by the Foundation? And
Oh,
that was a really cool song. But then I thought, you know what, the one that really pulled at me when I was a kid, the one that really connected me to nature and made me feel that way was Out in the Country by Three Dog Night.
wow,
You know,
wow.
before the breathing air is gone, before the star is just a bright spot in the nighttime, out where the rivers like to run, I stand alone and take that something worth remembering. That hammered me when I was a kid. That hammered me. I was just like, whoa.
Well, there's so many of them, Scott, and another one was you don't know what you got till it's gone.
Phew, that was a great song.
And here we are talking about music again, but it's important. It helped ingrain beliefs in us that we may have been too young to understand.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So
Oh,
this week with nature, you know, the dog park gave me a good one. They said, the first thing that came up when I talked about nature was stewardship. And that humans have kind of this responsibility to support nature, even if it's not just for our consumption. And that was unexpected. I really didn't expect them to kind of go ecologist on me. But they hit it, and I was like, "Whoa, you know what? That's an important point."
well, I think we all have that stewardship. If we apply a microeconomics viewpoint to it, to police ourselves and do what we can, that microeconomics, nature, save the earth, which Carlin phrased up in a succinct comedy set. It's too big a thought with so many different angles to it for us to be responsible for, but we can clean up our own house.
Oh, for sure, for sure. But it was interesting because I don't really think of the dog park crew as like very very kind of the leftist oriented or whatever. They're pretty straight people, and they were like you got to take care of nature. And I was like, oh, okay, that's good.
What?
But the other thing they said was, and this was I hadn't thought about this, was that having dogs in their life had really gotten them closer to nature because they weren't real outdoorsy people until they had a dog that really wanted them outdoors. And once they went outdoors with the dog, they started noticing and appreciating nature on a whole nother level. So that was kind of cool.
Well, it's very cool that their dogs are pulling them out of their confinement, which I've talked about is my experience with having to walk a cat, but that's great, and they're sharing that experience. They're sharing that experience with their pets. And damn it, they do care about the nature if they're picking up their dog's poop out of the dog park.
That's an issue in a dog park. It sure is. But just for that person that wants to, is already sitting there going, you know what? I'm kind of disconnected with nature. I've got an office job. I've been indoors most of the time. Right now, if you don't have a dog, run down to your local shelter and grab one. There's plenty of dogs out there, and they love being outdoors, and they'll take you out with them, and you'll get a little bit more.
Well, as long as you're a reasonably responsible person, because once you invite a pet into your life, you talk about stewardship. That pet will share your life, but you're responsible to treat that pet well.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That is a very important point. And with that, I would say, if you do go down to a shelter and get a dog, you want to kind of look at what kind of person you are and match that to what kind of person,
Yeah.
what kind of dog the dog is.
Yeah, and if you like to sit on the TV and watch, or sit on the couch and watch TV and eat potato chips, I would recommend a Basset Hound to you because they would love to
Oh yeah,
sit next to you and just enjoy that experience.
I've always been broadsided by my dogs, so I've always gotten random dogs given to me, and they've always been like they've always had to bring out a whole new side of me because I've had to adapt to the energy of the dog. My recent dog's a half Staffy, half Aussie Shepherd, and guess what? They walk at 8 miles an hour. I don't.
Yeah.
That's actually what got me to the dog. That's actually what got me to the dog park was I needed a place where I could just let her go off leash and let her walk at the speeds and run at the speeds that she wanted to walk at and run at.
Well, that's cool, Scott. And people that have been watching us, they need to understand that we make every effort to communicate with our pets, talking to them and listening to them and interacting with them.
In a way that's kind of a first step towards nature. You know, what really got me thinking about nature was back in the day when I was working at mental health. I started thinking about a radio show material, and I read the study, and the study was by an ornithologist, a bird scientist, and he went out into neighborhoods to kind of measure how many birds there were. But he asked kind of a random question of people too. Was he measured their degree of happiness, and it turned out that if you could hear birds, if there were birds in your neighborhood, you were inherently happier than if there were not.
Wow. Wow. Except
And I
for,
read the study, and I was like, I got to get this guy.
well, maybe, but I bet he wrote that before the Eurasian doves showed up.
Right? No, this guy was English, so it was Exeter University um, in England, and so we did it by Zoom. It was it was an interesting show.
Well, we should invite him to come on here with us. We've got, I hate to admit this, but we have a wild duck that has adopted us. And
Nice.
he comes flying in at about 6 my first outside time, 6 a.m., and you can hear him coming all the way, and he settles in. What he comes for is not necessarily food, not necessarily water. He comes for some interaction. Now, this was a duck that was too lazy to migrate, so now we're his peoples. And hopefully, when the wild ducks come back, as they typically do through this flyway, he will join them and become a duck.
Nice. I give it all the chance in the world. If you were an NCIS fan, I'd say, hey, name him Ducky, and we're all there.
No, people didn't. It was not by me, but it was called Quackers. If I were to have named it, it would have been Quack Quack, because I had a chicken I called Run Run, and he just comes in, he talks, and if you're not out, he'll fly around above the house, he'll fly around the windows, just quacking up a storm. And we started pulling the neighbors, and lo and behold, the neighbors are all familiar with him, and they are not minding. Hey, Luna, don't do that. Hey, they're not minding that 6 a.m. wake up call.
Yeah, it was Luna, by the way, for sure. You know, it's perfect though because I think that's the first point about nature we want to hit. Nature is immediate to your space, and so there's a small scale version of nature. You don't have to go out into the mountains or into the desert or over, in find some remote beach without that's not covered with people and smells like suntan oil. You can get nature right in your front yard.
Well, yes, all kinds of nature, insects. We don't spray for bugs because the bugs all have a purpose to us. It's not that we're PETA members, nor would we ever be, but everything has a purpose, and nature is, if that old adage, stop and smell the roses, but just experience it. Take a few deep breaths and just breathe it in, and it's therapy for me, Scott.
I've been in the same house now for 35 years, and I think when I started, I was a real kind of control guy, right? I was like, oh, there's an ant, let's get rid of these ants. There's a wasp, let's figure out where they live, their nest lives, and get rid of them. Um, and after a while, I started saying, it's their space, it's my space. If we can coexist, I don't want ants in my kitchen. I don't want wasps flying around my house. Um, I actually had a bee colony in the back wall of the room that I put all my rock tumblers in. It's kind of like a garage without cars. And I would sit in there, and they couldn't come in, but I could hear them humming all day because they had an entrance away from my entrance. And I thought, you know what? This is just like a security system. Nobody's gonna come in here during the day and mess with this thing because I've got a large colony of Africanized honeybees, like making the whole building hum.
Well,
But I got used to the wasps. I don't run them out now.
well,
I stay away from the stinging ants. The other little ones that don't really sting or bite, I just kind of let them do their thing.
all right. It's like, people don't realize this, but, we grew up watching Killer Bees on Saturday Night Live, and that was really a gross exaggeration of what was going to happen. And yes, bees have.
The fear was real, though, right?
Well, yeah.
When it was
Oh.
first happening, it was like fire ants and killer bees were going to make the planet uninhabitable.
Well, then we had killer wasp, but basically all swarms are Africanized bees.
The murder hornets of the next
Yeah,
generation of that.
yeah, yeah. All swarms are Africanized bees. And what beekeepers
They
do.
are, but they're remarkably well. I go out there and fill up their little water bowls, which double as feral cat water bowls, and they're all hanging around and stuff. But as long as you don't threaten a hive, they're just like any other bee.
Well, in essence, and they have a more aggressive nature to them, but it's not dramatically more aggressive. But what
And
beekeep
it's more colony driven. It's more colony driven.
and what beekeepers do is they capture that swarm and they replace the queen with a European queen or a queen from Hawaii. And since the whole hive takes on the tendency,
Properly integrated, of course, right? I mean, they
yeah,
don't just like smuggle queens in.
no, no, they pay money and they fly them in. They actually fly them first class, and they'll take the Africanized queen out of the hive, and they'll introduce once they know that the hive won't kill the European queen, they'll introduce her, and they have a way of doing that. And if you want to see it, I've done many videos on it, but they have a way of doing that. But the hive takes on the traits of the queen.
So they
So
start
what?
mellowing.
Yeah. So within a couple weeks, they mellow out. Is the Africanized gene still there? Not really. It's a mellow hive. I think if they put them on marijuana, I would like to know what the bees do if they're working marijuana fields.
So the Africanized queens are like listening, Donna, Mississippi Queen, Donna,
No, they're listening to
and, and the European queens are drinking tea with their little pinky fingers up.
exactly, exactly, exactly. Yeah, it's just a different culture, and there's so many cultures of bees which I didn't know until I started talking to these bee people. That they're amazing and so necessary for this planet. When we first moved here over 25 years ago, I met a retired beekeeper, and I said, well, how are the bees? He said, as long as they're not on onions. Because if they were working onions, they took on this really aggressive nature. And it actually,
Really?
yeah. So they're sensitive like we are. If you had to eat onions all day, you would probably be a nastier human being.
Now, our local seed to shelf CBD distributor actually has a big field in Holtville.
Well, thank goodness.
So, and there's another one up in Brawley. So if you want to see how cannabinized bees behave, we've got real stuff going on.
Well, I'm sure they're mellow. I'm sure they're mellow. And, we had a swarm on our garage wall, and I am allergic to bees, and I called a very good friend of mine, one of the Sanchez brothers from Westmoreland, who's uh, is a beekeeping operation. He said, well, send me a picture of that hive. And he remembered that I was allergic. He said, are you concerned? I go, well, I'm not going to set them off. And he said, well, give them 48 hours, and if they're still there, I'm going to come get them for you. Well, of course, he knew. He could look at that swarm and tell how long they were going to sit on that wall. In essence, what they were doing was they were coming in to rest so they could take
Yeah,
off again.
yes.
So they could take off again. And they behave themselves.
Yeah, I had one of those by my back door once, and it made for a couple of days of let's be careful not to let the stragglers in. But wasps are interesting because wasps in springtime, when they're just hatched, when the new generation is just coming out, they're super reactive. They're like, because they don't know what they need to be angry about. And it's like, yeah, when you go outside, you have to like talk soothingly to them and just say, "All right, it's all right, guys. It's okay. This is normal. Everything's fine." And right now, it's midsummer, and it's fine. It's like there's wasps all over the place, but they know that basically that there aren't any immediate threats, and it's important for any animal not to waste energy on threats.
Well, exactly.
If a threat's real, to spend energy, but not to get excited about everything.
Well, and right now the bees in Imperial Valley and the wasps in Imperial Valley, they're in starvation mode because there's not a lot of pollen out there, but they're
Yeah.
also desperate to bring water back to their hives. And they'll spend
I've
all
got
day doing that.
I bought a pool for the dog. It's got like little holes in it, so it kind of does a little sprinkler effect thing. Dog's like, I'm not that interested. But I left it running, and I left it running super low, and I was like, oh, look at this! All the birds and the wasps and the bees love this thing, and so I've been running it on and off all summer, like on very low settings, so it's like a drippy faucet almost. I walked out yesterday to go pick up my wife from work. I had 40 doves in my front yard. I know you're a big fan of the Euro doves, but I had all of them. I had the small species, the pygmy ones, the Stevie Nicks doves. I had all of them.
The Stevie Nicks doves. Are we talking about turtle doves or
The white
ground
winged
doves?
doves,
Oh, the white
the
wings.
white winged doves sing a
Okay.
song just like they're singing.
All right. Good.
Morning doves. They're actually morning doves.
Okay. Well, we get the Incas, which are ground doves and turtle doves,
Yep,
and
yep.
they're cute, and they may show up anywhere. I mean, they'll nest anywhere. They like to nest deep in bushes, and no, we enjoy those birds. You know, out here was used to be the home of the Audubon Society's big March to the Sea, and when that was going on, they'd be staying at a hotel we lived by, and I would come out at 6:30 in the morning, and there'd be two or three of them in my front yard looking up into one of the 40-foot palm trees, admiring a mourning dove.
Crushing, crushing on a morning dove.
And they were happy. They were thrilled. And I didn't understand it, but at least I was pleased that they were that happy, that this was making them happy.
Yeah, nice. And I live in the middle of the city, so to have 40 birds in my front yard is pretty cool. I've got mockingbirds, generational mockingbirds. For the past 12 years or so, I've fed mealworms to mockingbirds,
Oh my
and
gosh.
so the original ones are long gone. Frank and Vanessa were the original ones, and I would of course call all of the subsequent ones Frank and Vanessa. But somehow it just kept going. And so when I get home from work, or if I go out in the morning, take the dog outside, I've got mockingbirds flying right up next to me and telling me, "Hey, guy, feed me."
And respecting you.
Well, no, they still sing at midnight.
Well, yeah, well, that's only the males looking for a mate. And, and
and
it's,
and I like the hummingbirds are really creative singers.
well, yeah, they are. And sometimes it's hard to identify that you'll go, what was that? Oh, mockingbird. Mockingbird.
Yeah, because they make stuff up. They're really good at that.
You know, we get a blackbird with a yellow beak that I really want to believe they're minor birds. They'll actually meow to the cats. And it is so,
Maybe a magpie. It's kind of like a minor bird. It's the bottom end of the crow family, and they do a lot of impersonation stuff.
well, I thought magpies were black and white.
There are some black and white ones. There are other types that are different colors as well.
Okay. Yeah,
We
but
can
it's,
Google it, figure it out.
no, no, I believe you, Scott. It's just, I was just always fascinated by why that bird up in that tree loved to torment. And they know they're tormenting.
Yeah, yeah. Mockingbirds have a word for cat, but it's not to be repeated.
Well, my
And
cat,
I can tell when they're saying it. I can like, oh, there's a cat around. because I got mockingbird now.
Well, my cat doesn't like mockingbirds, and he used to love to lay on his back in the yard and try and bait them to come into him. And as soon as they did come into him, it was like all four claws going. And he just when he sees a mockingbird, not when he hears one, he just has to get rid of it. So I'm assuming when he was a kitten, a mockingbird was very nasty to him.
Yeah, I bet. Now I've got bird feeders too, so I've got finches and sparrows and starlings, and I've got so much, but I've got so much low cover in my yard because of the trees that I don't get grackles and I don't get pigeons. So I figure it's kind of a win-win. I've got the kind of birds that are messier, not as much, but I get lots of nature, like right there out in my front yard.
Well, I enjoy watching
I'll
them.
typically
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, I enjoy watching the male grackles as they strut around in the dead of summer, 117 degrees, just puffed up and showing off. And I don't think they fear anything.
No, they are cool birds, and unless you get a whole tree of them talking all at once, and then it's like, wow, guys, turn it down.
Well, we get that. We get trees of blackbirds that'll do that from time to time, but it's part of it. Grackles are almost prehistoric.
Yeah, they are cool birds, but they don't like my yard because there's not enough room for them to take off. They like more open area.
In me being a sap, I was trying to save a baby bird from the cats that I figured had a few minutes to live, so I put it in a small box and brought it inside. It was cold outside, and I thought, well, he can just pass in peace. And about 3 hours later, cheep, 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 cheep. Well, I raised that.
Baby,
Yeah, I raised that dove to an adult where he was able to leave, and lo and behold, did that again with a pigeon. Imagine, and both of them were very affectionate. Both of them were very appreciative, much more so than any domestic bird. Maybe because it was that young bonding that I'd ever had, and the dove was so bad that once she was back in the wild, you would open the door in the morning and she would fly inside just to spend time with you. And they went on. They went on and came back. Actually, after they really matured, they didn't need us anymore, but they still came back and brought their friends, and that was the mistake.
I rescued a couple of fledgling pigeons about a year and a half ago after a big thunderstorm. They were being raised in the drain, and so they got knocked out. They were all wet. They were all bedraggled, and they fell off of a second story. And I took them home, put them, got them dry, got them fed, got them whatever. They destroyed my mother-in-law's bathroom, but eventually they were good to go. And right about the time that they were able to start flying, I took them back and just kind of tossed them back up to where the pigeons live on the second floor, and they greeted me every day. You're absolutely right. They were
Yeah,
like they knew who I was. They would come out and kind of just coo at me and I was like, hey guys, how are you today?
and
And
they,
that's nature.
yeah,
That's a relationship with nature.
oh, absolutely, and it's rewarding. It actually is. I'm not a pigeon fan, but I'll be damned. He was my pigeon. He was my pigeon.
Right?
Yeah.
They are some kind of messy. They wouldn't be here if we weren't here. Pigeons followed humans, and they're not even native to the United States. Neither are the ringnecks, the Eurodoves. All those things are invasive species.
Right.
Of course, where we live in the Imperial Valley, we're an invasive species. Nobody was living in El Centro before people brought water and electricity to the area.
No, Father Kino may have passed through, but you're right,
It
Scott.
was it was a pass exactly. It was a pass through area for a couple local tribes.
And it was dangerous. It was dangerous till there was an assured water supply. But people migrated here, and that's why
Yeah,
we're
for
here.
sure. That's why we're here. So point number one is nature can be local, right? And you can build your own nature or appreciate your own nature. We got 12 species of birds in the dog park. Scarlet tanagers, which are kind of cool. We got a lot of neat birds, and you can just watch them building nests, having doing bird things, hanging out, and that's nature. All of our local parks have lots of different kinds of birds, so you don't have to take the big road trips to find the you don't have to go glamping and spend a lot of money and buy a big trailer and stuff like that. which brings me to my second point. There is so much immediately available nature outside of human habitation areas, especially in California. We're California boys. It is amazing. One of the things that I did on a regular basis with my kids when they were growing up, we do these gypsy camping trips around California. Get a rental car, space out the reservations 1 or 2 days apart, hit the park, walk around the park, do the hiking trails, throw up the tent, do easy peanut butter and jelly kind of dinners, and then move on. The next day, the next couple of days, move on. So we ended up seeing all the mountainous areas up the Sierras. We saw, the Mount Lassen, the most recent volcano that just erupted in 1914. Happy Camp. I loved Happy Camp. It was Bigfoot Company, Bigfoot Country, Siskiyou Mountains. Lots of very cool people, but lots of very remote terrain. Just amazingly beautiful stuff. And then, of course, going down the coast. Uh, there are so many parks along the coast that there's just camping and camping and camping. And it's cheap camping. It's $20 a night, and you and your car and your tent. So it's not that expensive, but you can see amazing stuff. And I don't mean just banana slugs.
Well, no,
I saw bear. I've seen cougar. I've seen, of course, the obvious deer, raccoon, elk. Elk are very. There's nothing like camping, like in a BLM campsite for $5, and it's 6 o'clock in the morning, and all of a sudden elk are bugling all around you, and you're like, wow, this is pretty cool.
well, it is. And you talk about the coast, whales, dolphin, big fish with white bellies. You can see it all.
I was hanging out at Halama Beach is one of my favorite spots. It's a little spot between Santa Barbara and Lompoc, and it's county park, which means they let you take rocks, which is another topic someday. But I was hanging out. It was raining, and there were dolphins close to shore, and I was like sitting there with my camera, going, "I'm gonna get a dolphin picture. I'm gonna get a dolphin picture," and they would just come up for a second, so it's hard to do. So I'm like taking pictures, taking pictures. I go home and develop the pictures. One of them's got a shark fin, like like I was the Jaws cameraman. It was boom right there, nice, perfectly shaped fin, and a big one. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. I'm glad I'm not surfing.
Yeah. Well, they do surfer control, and that's kind of part of their job. Because,
We're more dangerous to them than they are to us. Bottom line.
oh, absolutely. And there again, if you're a surfer, that's a risk you've elected to take, like a mountain climber or anything else. It's whatever
Oh yeah,
makes you
absolutely.
whatever makes you happy. I hate to admit this, but I was years ago I was on the board of the North American Bear Society, and part of what we did was, we were the first entity to create bear-proof trash containers, and all the parks wanted them, and we kept track of the bear attacks, and there are a lot of them. But having a chance to go to Churchill, to see so many bears in the wild, and I was always that person that if there was a bear within 5 miles, he would find me. Not for malice, he would just show up. And because I talked to my chickens as a child, I talked to the wild bear when he showed up.
Yeah, I talked to them. My impression with wild bears has always been they've got the best WTF look ever. I mean, when they like, oh my god, it's a human.
Yeah.
And hats off to you guys because uh, bear-proof trash containers save bears' lives.
Well, it really does, because once a garbage bear is a garbage bear, no matter what the press tells you, no matter what the media tells you, he's put down. He's
Now,
tagged.
were you also part? Were you also part of the reverse Second Amendment guys? The right to arm bears?
Well, no, but I'm all for it. And I'm all for that. A bull elk can take care of himself, and bears should. Bears should. Never had the desire to hunt a bear. Certainly hunted a lot of things, but it's hard to sit on a mountain and be glassing a bear that is floating on his back in a water tank built for cattle, and splashing his tummy and his face with water, having a great time. And all he's trying to do is cool off.
Yeah. Um, Bears are a special. I have a fondness for bears because they visit me in dreams and talk to me and give me like advice and counsel. And I'm like, what did I do to deserve this kind of niceness from your tribe? And they say, well, they told me once. They said we could have been humans. We had that all figured out too, but we saw where that was headed, and we didn't think it was cool. And so we decided to stay in the forest, stay by ourselves, and develop these kind of solitary, omnivorous kind of lifestyles. And I was like, oh, really?
Well, I hope in your dreams you paid them enough respect. You provided them with a picnic basket.
Right. I did. I actually traded food once. They'd rescued a human child once, and I gave them some food, and they gave me the kid.
Well, that's not. You're not supposed to feed those wild bears. You're not supposed to feed any wildlife. But I do enjoy
That
the
is true.
tourists that try and get their selfies with the buffalo because the buffalo is not a happy animal.
So the most fearful I've ever been, and again, I've run into bears and cougars. Uh, Not that kind of cougar. The ones that are cats.
You've run into both, but
And
okay.
indeed, the most fearful I have ever been was I was hiking Royal Isle National Park, and silently out of nowhere, a fully grown dominant male moose
Oh,
stepped out into the trail. This thing was big as a freaking house,
mm-hmm.
and it did not make a sound, and it had this implicit menace to it that was just. I can imagine it would be like having a polar bear come up on your ice floe or something. I just felt I didn't take out my little camera. I didn't do any selfies. I damn near didn't pet the thing. It was, I froze. I had a primal fear. I absolutely froze. Like my life is over right now. It was, it was such a majestic experience.
Well,
And
absolutely.
moose do kill more people than most wildlife.
Well, except for bees.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Bees be number one. No, it's just I wish I could share some of the experiences I've had with others. That's why I encourage them to develop a passion and go out there, just be amongst wildlife and respect it. It's so many good times spent. My father was not a big outdoorsman, but he made sure I had those experiences. Fishing and camping, and he was a World War II vet. He didn't need any of those experiences, but I grew up respecting it, and I can't say enough about it. You should try and get that doctor on here so he can talk about his animal experiences and his bird experiences.
It was an interesting interview. I've got some legacy there too, though. My dad was kind of outdoorsy, but not a whole bunch, and my mom certainly was not very outdoorsy. But both my grandfathers were outdoorsmen. One was very much into hunting, and I didn't catch that bug somehow. I caught fishing as a bug, but I didn't catch hunting. But both of them were provided me the keys to get out. Like my one grandpa bought me a little boat with an electric motor, and
Wow.
I could go to his house in the summer, and I could motor off of that lake up into rivers where there were no houses, up into little channels where there were lakes that didn't have any houses, and just sitting quietly in spaces like that. The deer come to drink. You see all sorts of things that you wouldn't see if you're hanging out making a lot of noise with your stereo blasting out. No matter if it's a really wild spot, you can chase the wildlife away.
No, absolutely. I had a different experience. I was shipped back to Iowa as a 7-year old, and as soon as I flew in to be at my grandparents, I was taken to the Sears catalog store, and my grandfather bought me overalls, gloves, and a hoe.
You're being spoiled.
Oh yeah, and
I
that
get
was
like Montgomery Ward. Okay, you were going to Sears.
Sears catalog store, and that was to go back there and learn a work ethic at a young age, and I got to work in the fields alongside my grandparents, who were both in their mid 60s, weeding the beans, weeding the corn. Can you imagine what a lousy weeder I was? But the flip side of that was in the afternoon, we would go to the local reservoir and we would go and I would be fawned over and get to fish. And I was happy, and then we'd get home in time for those black thunderstorms that I would come rolling in.
Oh, not. Yep.
But fond memories, and that was outdoors. That was outdoors. You know, that's
Some listeners have that connection. They may not have, we were lucky enough to get mentored.
well, we were. You know, when I had when my grandparents quit driving, and I went to gather them from Iowa to come to Arizona. We were driving. We didn't drive on any of the interstates because my grandfather wanted to drive on the small local highways because he could see all the little towns and all the fields. And he would remark, he'd say, "That is a beautiful field of beans. That is a beautiful field of corn." And I thought to myself, how silly. I didn't say anything. I just thought, how silly. Then when we moved to Imperial Valley, I caught myself going, wow, that's a beautiful field of Sudan grass. Wow, that's a beautiful field of alfalfa. And I stopped and I started laughing and I said, oh my gosh, it's genetic. But see, that's another way you can experience nature. Go into an
Oh,
agriculture.
absolutely.
Even man-made nature can be a wonderful, remarkable thing.
I for a while was driving Miss Daisy with a woman named Edna Martin, who was one of the real estate moguls of this community for a long time for agriculture. And she, for hours, would explain the various soils all over the Imperial Valley and what they were good at growing, what they couldn't grow as well, and why something was valuable and something was less valuable. And it was fascinating.
Well, it is, and complicated and complex, and which how you keep an organic field, and that's another aspect of nature. What the farmers go through to keep an organic field organic, and what they have to protect from. And people need to recognize that an organic field, they have to put up signs that say no dogs because
Yeah,
they
yeah,
they,
absolutely.
they can't have a dog leave excrement in the field. And I always found that sign kind of funny because while I'm reading it, there's 1,000 birds flying overhead.
Right.
So some
Well,
things,
and people even feed their dogs organic food now. So you'd think what was coming out would
yeah, you
equal
would
what was
think.
going in.
You would think. Well, yeah, they should have said only organic dogs, but lots of rules, and but it's just those people have some of the greatest respect for nature that I've ever met because it's their livelihood.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I got a story for you. There's really good local camping up in the mountains, BLM camping. And it's out in McKean Valley, which is local if you could look it up if you want. But I was out there one night camping because it's really good stargazing. So I would go out there just to hang out and look at stars because there's a couple of mountain ranges that block all the light from all the cities. And so one night I was sitting out there around, I don't know, 11 o'clock, midnight or so. It was plenty dark and there was no moon. So it was a good stargazing. And I got hungry. And so I had peanut butter and honey sandwiches, which if you've ever been hungry, those work.
Oh yeah.
And so I took one out and I opened it. And the revelation was that is a very calorie starved area because the minute I opened that thing, the woods came alive, the desert came alive. I heard rustling here, I heard rustling there. I don't know what it was, ring-tailed cats, raccoons, possum, good Lord knows. But I heard sounds all around me, and it was all because of that silly peanut butter and honey sandwich. And I started apologizing. I was like, okay, let me tear some pieces and throw it out, and
Let me-
hit you guys up a little bit because they were all like, that's food, and we could eat it.
yeah, and that is in my lifetime. I've been a lot of places, seen a lot of wildlife, but what I loved most was going into the desert, where most people don't see wildlife. I find it everywhere. What's in the bushes, what's flying in, who's calling out, and it's fascinating to me, and it's home to me. That nasty cholla cactus desert where all the critters go to hide, but It's important, and it's another aspect we
I
need.
love I love it out there. And if you go in summer, you'll never see another person. There won't be any humans. But
Well,
the animals will still be there. They have to survive it.
no, they do, and it doesn't mean that you can. If you can tolerate the snakes, you can go out there in the summertime in the early evening and the early morning and really enjoy it and see the desert come alive because it is full of lots of those sounds, lots of that rustling, and more animals than most people can imagine.
You know, Speaking of nature, it is the beginning of blacklight scorpion season. So if you've got a blacklight flashlight that you've been using at raves or to check the IDs of people walking your house or whatever, it is prime time to go out to the desert and just walk around shining that thing on the ground, and you're going to be surprised. Because scorpions glow like they
They're
grew up in
radioactive.
Spencer Gifts or something in the
Yeah,
mall.
yeah, they're
Uh,
radioactive.
yeah. And so they're beautiful, and so that's kind of a fun thing to do. Uh, I've seen I when I go out to the Cholla deserts, I've run into families of burros, native, not
Not native,
native,
not
invasive.
native, invasive, very invasive. Yeah.
They're kind of native now because they've been there since like the 1860s. But it's fun to watch them walking around with their families, and they'll stop and they'll check out like you're human, and they won't run away. You obviously you can't walk over and pet them or anything, but it's neat to see them interact with us.
Well, you're right. They don't have any fear, and they are there. Now the one thing was never saw in the wild was tarantulas. I always wondered why that was until one October evening when the ground was crawling with them because that was their breeding season, and they all come
Yep, yep.
out and they just go crazy, and you can catch them. And well, I never felt the need to catch one, but you can really see them going crazy because the tarantula pheromones are active and they're just running around like they are crazy.
I went camping once up at one of the mountain lakes and forgot the tent poles.
That happens.
Dad, Dad forgot the tent poles, and so it's like, well, it's cool. We'll just camp on the tent on the ground. And so we're like, kind of crashed out on our sleeping bags, tent on the ground, and a big old tarantula walked right across all of us, and it was like, oh, that's different.
And what we have a lot of still in Imperial Valley is wolf spiders, which a lot of people mistake for tarantulas. And
Yeah, and they're just buddies, man. They're taking care of your light work.
well,
They're
they
they're
are.
your can of bug spray. They'll do it for you for free, and you won't poison anything.
Well, and my first experience was in Phoenix, 7 years old, moving into the first house. My mom screams, "There's a spider! Come get it! It must be a tarantula." So, being a brave child, I took a piece of newspaper and I was going to swat that wolf spider. Well, wolf spiders can jump about 3 feet in the air. When you go to swat one,
And they can move. They go fast.
I think it jumps right at you, and you leave that spider alone.
I was about 4. I went up to my grandma and grandpa's cottage up in the thumb of Michigan, Caseville, Michigan, and being a dutiful little helpful kid because that was my role in life.
Your nickname.
I go in there and they got all these spiders, and I'm like, so I start executing the spiders dutifully.
Yeah.
And my grandpa like finally leans over his cup of coffee and looks at me and says, "Scotty, what are you doing?" I'm like, "Killing the spiders, Grandpa. I'm a good kid." Scotty, 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 Scotty. Those spiders kill all the bad bugs. They're okay. Leave them alone. They won't hurt you. You don't hurt them. Just leave them alone. And I was 4. So you can imagine how many spiders have not gotten killed since then.
Well, exactly. There's no point. I remember having to help my brother-in-law in Phoenix when we had a what's called a spider bloom. You hear of spider blooms, cricket blooms. This was a black
Yeah,
widow.
yeah.
This was a black widow spider bloom at their house, and to give people an example of it, and they had very small children. I would go around and either hold the flashlight or hold the lighter, but we would execute probably 30 spiders every night.
Yeah. I know where black widows live because they're potentially dangerous enough that you want to definitely respect them. Nothing like reaching your hand into an old box in your garage and feeling that sticky wet,
Yeah.
like kind of heavy. You're like, oh crap, you get your hand out of there as quickly as possible. Um, but I've never had an explosion, and you know what? I'll be honest. I think nowadays we have less local black widows than we used to have. Because when I first moved here, black widows were thick.
Well,
I worked at a school once, and I walked out into their quad area, into the place where all the kids would hang out for lunch and recess. And I told the principal, I said, "So you guys aren't worried about black widows here, huh?" And then she's like, "Oh, they're really awful things." And I'm like, "Well, there's like 20 of them living here under all the picnic tables, so you may want to be aware of that."
well, and you may believe they're diminished, but they will be back in a robust fashion after a couple of moderate winters, and
Yeah,
they will explode again. But
and they like crickets. I mean, so ultimately they kind of ride the cricket population.
well, and that's we're lucky where we are. We have lizards, we have tiger lizards, we have lots of things that deal with all the bug critters, which are subterranean roaches, crickets. Every once in a while we get a cricket bloom, but not often.
That's a good point. I've got the swifts, and I've got the softs, the geckos, and that's part of nature too. I can sit out in my front yard, and I've got kind of a shade screen on my porch, so I can sit on my porch. And the lizards love the shade screen because they can cover a lot of territory and go wherever they want. So I just watch them like doing their little lizard thing, and that's nature, and it counts. And you didn't have to drive somewhere. You didn't have to rent a car. You didn't have to pay park entrance fees. And you're feeling it and you're experiencing it.
Well, we rejoice every time we see a gopher or king snake.
Hey, they're our best friends. Keep the vermin down.
Keep the vermin down. Well, Scott, why don't you leave us with a couple final thoughts?
I think the thought is this is nature is a really critical point to human happiness, whether we've gotten there or not. And so it's about maximizing your potential. And for some of us, that's going to be glamping. Some of us are going to be able to kind of go to one of the beautiful national parks that have so, or even the state parks that have so much great land. Others of us are going to go on the cheap,
Yeah.
and that means BLM campgrounds are $6 a night. You put your five and your one if you're still carrying money, because they don't have a person there to take a credit card into a little slot, and then you park in the place, and you've got a pit toilet, but that's fine, it works, and that's going to be nature. But you've got front yards, you've got parks, you've got dog parks, you've got all of these different places where you can experience nature simply by stopping and noticing it. And when you
Well,
stop and notice it, then you can appreciate it.
no, absolutely. And I would encourage everybody to watch out for free federal park days that happen during the year, national parks, and state parks, where you can actually go into those state parks, and even if it's just for the day, get out into nature and enjoy yourself.
And a special bonus, if you're walking around in nature, walking is like the best thing you can do for your body. So you don't even have to join the gym.
And sing a nature song while you do. All right. Hey, everybody. This has been Justin Case and Scott bringing you American Consciousness. Thanks for joining us. Remember, additional information and links provided in this video is read more. Today's the day to subscribe to this channel. Please learn more about Scott when time permits.